Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of what I'm currently calling the Litecoin Underground video podcast. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I guess the video series. This is our fourth episode. We got Seth For Privacy in today. He's even got his mic muted because he doesn't want anybody to hear what he has to say.
Super private.
Yeah, super private. As you guys know, our sponsor of the Underground is Cake Wallet, the official wallet of the Litecoin Underground. You must be a big fan of Cake Wallet right off the bat, right, Seth?
I am, yeah. I know the guys behind it, and obviously they've been a huge part of the Monero community for a long time. I think first iOS wallet, and they've done a ton to help support people in the Monero community, projects in the Monero community, and yeah, they've been a big part of that. So big fan of both the tool itself and the people behind it.
Yeah, they've been the same way with us. So anyway, go to Cake Wallet, check it out, download the app and everything. And actually, well, it kind of right before we came on the air, I was talking to Seth, and he mentioned his journey. We're going to get into some privacy stuff. I want to kind of go not be full crypto all the way, but kind of start out kind of where it correlates to crypto. And Seth started out as were you a Monero person right off the bat?
No, so I kind of did I think a different journey than most people. I started out kind of messing around with whatever, just got into the space to try to make money. Had no interest in the technology, no interest in it as a tool for freedom, nothing like that.
That's the normal path. I hope you know that.
No, I'm getting there. That's the normal path. I know. Almost nobody gets in for anything altruistic. If we're honest, I think most people come in for the speculative value, but started out that way and then became really a pretty hardcore Bitcoin maximalist, listening to all the Bitcoin Maxi podcasts, and kind of gave up everything else when I realized that the majority of the stuff in the space was a scam, or disingenuous, or just a bad idea. Lots of different stuff.
Short-lived, most of them, right?
Yeah, for sure. Most stuff doesn't last long, or does despite not doing anything. But I think once I realized what Bitcoin could do, but then started to see a few of the flaws, I had gotten into Monero mining just, again, to make money. I had no interest in the privacy or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Had gotten into mining it just because I work in IT, or have. I love kind of the technical side of things as a hobby, and thought that building a GPU mining rig would be fun back in the day. So spun that up and got into Monero that way, and the community around Monero really kind of showed me the importance of privacy, both on the blockchain cryptocurrency side. Obviously in Monero, privacy is a key focus and a default aspect of Monero, but then also talking more about personal privacy and about how financial privacy alone is very important, but it's not a holistic thing. You're going to have problems if you're not thinking about your personal privacy in other areas, especially if you're doing things that people don't want you to do, whether those are illegal or legal or political dissidents or whatever it is. But you need to think more broadly about personal privacy. So that kind of got me into the privacy side of things and the Monero side of things at the same time, but kind of went altcoiner, maximalist, and then back to focusing on Monero. And I kind of realized that it fixed the issues that I had with Bitcoin and with its technical approach.
Yeah, I never got bitten by the maximalism bug. Like maybe that's maybe never been my nature to just be like all in and not being open to talking to people about stuff. I've always felt like this. So maybe you weren't a toxic maximalist. You were just a maximalist.
Yeah. I mean, not in the sense of like I was just rejecting any other kind of discussion points or anything like that, but just in the idea of like Bitcoin is the only thing that matters. So that's the thing that I'll focus on. But I think when I got past the kind of speculative digital gold narrative and into like what can this stuff actually be used for, and started caring about transactions and started caring about really what can enable freedom and not what can make me the most money or what has the best chance of rocketing to the moon, like that kind of thing. I start to take a more nuanced view of the space and really try to investigate things from a more neutral perspective and just see what made sense, and obviously ended up mostly focusing on Monero, but I've touched on a lot of different cryptocurrencies and technologies throughout the years.
Yeah, like I always felt like, I think once you recognize, hey, this was an invention of a tool, and that tool is to, secure your own money and transfer value from one person to another, you start going, well, there's other tools that also do that. And what are the features that each of them have? And, the trade-offs that you might get from one versus the other. But I'd be, kind of making a mistake if I didn't bring up Mimblewimble tonight. What time is it right now? It's 9 o'clock tonight, Eastern time. But I think it's going to be at about 1:30 in the morning. A very convenient time for me. Mimblewimble on Litecoin is going to become usable. Right now, it's the miners have signaled it and everything, and so we're going to do kind of a launch live stream here in a few hours after I get done with you, and not you aren't going to be there with Charlie and them, but yeah, I mean, have you dug into that at all? Have you tried to understand what MWeb does? And if you haven't, don't feel bad.
I haven't dug much into Mimblewimble extension blocks specifically.
Okay.
So when Grin came out and Mimblewimble started becoming more of a talking point in the space, I did a lot of research into Mimblewimble itself, and into the things that can be done with it. So I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of what Mimblewimble does. Obviously, with Mimblewimble extension blocks, it's not something I'm super familiar with, but I know it's an optional. You can opt into using these extension blocks to gain better privacy through both the ephemerality of Mimblewimble, which is where your transactions are combined with others. So you gain some privacy except from those people running nodes. And then also, obviously, amounts are hidden in Mimblewimble, so that's another big advantage that it can have. But it has some really cool scaling properties along with some good privacy properties as well. So I'm curious. I mean, the biggest thing for me with Litecoin's approach is that it is optional. So I'm very curious to see what kind of uptake you'll have.
I know. I understand. There's the Zcash Monero base layer optional privacy war that will forever be fought. I understand all that, and yeah, and I understand. I think more than anything, to me, I feel like the fungibility part of it is really what the primary achievement will be out of this, if it's used enough, right? If it's used in large enough volumes, or even a large, 25% of transactions are there on a regular basis, that would be certainly enough to start. It becomes this massive kind of coin join at some point in time.
So it is important when you're talking about fungibility. It's important to remember that something like this that is optional is not going to bring fungibility to all of Litecoin. It'll essentially segment Litecoin into two pools, where you'll have the normal pool of funds, which will be non-fungible like Bitcoin, and then you'll have those funds which are within Mimblewimble extension blocks. And those coins will theoretically be fungible with each other, but you'll essentially have fungibility pools, two of them, one that's really not fungible and one that's mostly fungible with each other. So there is some nuance there that is the big thing that comes with optional versus default, is you can't really gain network-wide fungibility unless you make it the default for every transaction.
Okay, we could sit there and we could probably discuss this all day, because I mean, my personal opinion is that essentially, if at some point you can break the chain with the previous transactions, right, and coins are moving in and out of there at a large enough velocity, there's enough transaction volume that on Litecoin that hopefully that would happen. But that, I guess, it remains to be seen, right? So we'll see how that plays out.
I'm probably the person in the world who said the word fungibility the most, so I'm definitely I understand if that's a boring topic or one people don't want to dive in.
Well, I don't. I mean, I want to talk to you about other stuff, because I think fungibility is frankly, I think the word is almost intentionally boring. It's like sometimes these financial terms, it's like they're purposely confusing to just make people go, I don't know, I don't care. So you just can't get people's attention with saying fungibility. They're like, all right, you lost me at fungibility.
I think the only good play on the word is I have a T-shirt from Tari, who actually are using Mimblewimble in their network, and they made a shirt that says Monero puts the fun in fungibility.
Yeah,
it's probably the only good twist I've seen on the word.
Hilarious. I posted that the other day as a joke, and I mean, it's a pretty obvious one, but well, anyway, I mean, and maybe we'll find out. I think tonight I'm excited about sending some coins via MWeb, and in reality, the other part, like you mentioned, is the extension block part, which I think is an interesting thought, because I just put something up today. How many different types of extension blocks can you have? How difficult is this to do? And like you mentioned, with capacity, by trimming so much information out, it'll be an interesting move. And I think it's a huge upgrade and a huge directional change for Litecoin to really separate itself from being the just clone of Bitcoin,
Do you
So
know if it'll be cheaper to transact in the InWeb blocks versus regular
we'll
Litecoin
find out. It's
transactions?
already incredibly inexpensive for now.
Yeah, I'm just curious if there's that incentive, but like I said, I haven't done a ton of due
Oh, to like
diligence.
within Mimblewimble?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know because I know it's going to cost a little more to get on MWeb.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I mean, it's going to be negligible, right? Actually, I just sent myself from Cake Wallet because I put some in my core wallet, and my fee was $0.0066, so 6/10 of a penny.
Yeah.
It's almost not. There might have been even 6/100 of a penny. That might even make more sense. So yeah, for now, I mean, it's negligible, and we're all optimistic about it because again, I look at the experience of using Bitcoin and understanding what you're sharing with the people around you, um, and your coworkers or your boss can see where you're spending your money. All these people can see everything. Once you
Mm-hmm.
recognize, like, wow, it's all out there. It does get very. It's kind of creepy. It's the opposite of privacy, that's for
Yeah.
sure, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
all right. Well,
Very much
anyway,
so.
but to talk about privacy, because I would like to dive into this a little bit, because this is a topic that comes up because I do get a lot of in our Twitter spaces. We're not just all Litecoiners. I get a lot of Monero people, and I think I became aware of you because of a lot of Monero people, and like Cake Wallet, Justin's been in, and so
Mm-hmm.
they've kind of it's something that again I think it's a passion. People they start to understand it, and they have to take those baby first steps, and so maybe for my audience, the baby first steps are going to be what are the basics, right? Now, I was asking you before we got on. You said you might reference this email or whatever you sent me, but are there kind of like levels of privacy? Because I when I think of privacy, I think having if I could put a firewall around my house, so to speak, so that or maybe better way to put it that I can optionally choose to share what I want to share, or that I'm aware of what I'm sharing, and that maybe bad actors can't utilize my information against me without my permission, type of thing. And so maybe I'm blending a lot of different things, but is there kind of a first level, like how to best protect yourself, or like best practices to avoid blatant just giving giving information away to bad people?
Yeah. I mean, it boils down to kind of that idea of like what do you want to protect that you touched on, and the term that's often used in deciding that or kind of building a model around that is called building a threat model or threat modeling.
Okay.
And it's essentially this just simple idea of what do you want to protect, who do you want to protect it from, and then what lengths you're willing to go to protect it. And so doing something like that, and it can be a pretty simple exercise, or you can go really in depth with it, but having that idea in mind of what you want to protect, who you want to protect it from, and what lengths you're willing to go to protect it will help you decide kind of what steps are worth it to you, to kind of improve your personal privacy. And you hit on really what privacy is, and how you were just kind of mentioning this, and that it's the ability to selectively reveal yourself to the world. So it's not necessarily anonymity. It often gets paired with that, but it's not necessarily that you just cease to exist in normal society, or that you're somebody that no one knows who you are, maybe even not your friends.
Yeah,
But
I told you I listened back to your first podcast with Tech Lore, and it was you guys were talking about that desire to go like to ghost the world, right? You just totally turn off, and then in my head I'm thinking, I don't know if you're old enough to know the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. Do you remember him? He
mm-hmm.
lived like in a 10 foot by 10 foot shack in the Montana desert. That's how you end up being completely anonymous.
Yeah, that's essentially what you have to do. I mean, most people don't need that and don't want that. I mean, ultimately, you're not going to generally want to give up everything to be anonymous, and you won't necessarily gain anything by being anonymous, depending on what kind of your focus is, and again, like what you want to protect. For most people, it's really about having that control again, and we've slowly merged into this world where we've given up all control over our data, usually without consent, sometimes with our consent, but usually if it's with our consent in any way, it's behind this massive legalese form that everyone just checks the box and clicks
Yeah.
yes and continues on when they create their account. And we've really gotten used to that world, but that's just not the way it used to be. We used to have kind of default privacy when you think about your life. If you wanted someone to know something, you had to give them a call on the phone, or you had to go see them in person, or you had to write them a letter. And almost no one knew anything about you that you didn't want to reveal to them. But that's quickly changed, and a lot of that has changed because of things like surveillance capitalism, where companies have realized that they can make money not only off of you giving them money for a service they provide, but even on a free service, they can collect your data and use it to better sell ads to you, better sell things to you, even just sell your data to the highest bidder, because information about who we are, what we like, what we don't like, where we live, etc., is very, very valuable. One of my good friends who goes by the name the new oil goes by that name because data really kind of is the new oil. That it's an immensely valuable commodity, and giving up our control over our own data is immensely damaging to a lot of aspects of life. But taking some initial first steps to just kind of take back the simple pieces of privacy can really have an immense effect. And like you mentioned, it's not something where you need to go live in a 10 by 10 shack in the desert, but it can just be these small, meaningful, approachable steps towards having better control over that data about who you are, about what you're doing, about what you like, about what you don't like, about who you talk to, about who you or what you talk with them about, those kinds of things. So, yeah, I sent you a list to or a link to a blog post that I wrote a while ago that just kind of gives like if I were to do it over again, what steps would I take, and in what order,
Okay.
kind of what like I value personally, and it's very much a personal list. But I
I
think
wonder,
it's a
you want me to share that in the chat here?
yeah, go
I
for it.
could probably do that. Let me see. Let me make sure I can do this. Hang on. I don't know how to use the internet. Hold on. I was trying to. It
Privacy.
was a link, and I was trying to copy it, and it wouldn't let me. So hang on a second. I haven't actually posted comments in the thread, so I'll see how this works. But yeah, it's interesting because when again I don't know a ton about you, so I'm having to glean everything off of what I heard in the couple of podcasts I listened to. But one thing that struck me is that, everybody's told me one of the things I've heard about is always get a password manager. Like step
Mm-hmm.
one, easy way to um, boost your privacy and more maybe your security even. But what I think the other benefit of that is that it's a convenience help.
Yeah,
Like I think the one thing that really I haven't really dived dived into the
it's always
Web
a hard one.
three. I haven't really gone into the Web three stuff too deeply, but one thing that I heard about early on is this idea. I get one. I can have one kind of digital presence that spans across all these different applications. So I don't have to memorize 1,000 different passwords, and I don't have to have all my logins. I don't remember, was it supposed to be capitalized or did I need an exclamation point? Which password did I use? And so I wonder, for people like if you can increase the convenience of their lives, that's a very easy way to start looking at privacy and saying, okay, well, I get a benefit out of it because a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
does, like you said, you don't get any financial reward going and living in the desert by yourself. Like it makes your life more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe trying to find the simple things that you can do that make the user's life easier. And yeah,
Yeah,
password managers, stuff like people hate spam phone calls, people hate spam emails, and it seems logical that I'm sure like you did mention some tools in that show, but what are some tools that people can look at that'd be first step, baby
yeah.
steps?
Yeah, I mean, a password manager, like you mentioned, is like that's probably the biggest change in your online life that you can bring about, and it definitely does have some privacy benefits. Mainly just that if you're not reusing passwords and email addresses across every service, it's harder for someone to be able to just break into your accounts and get access to the data in there. So obviously, it's not going to protect you from it's not going to protect Google from pulling data from the things you do on Google when you're logging in using password manager, but it really does help the security angle, which also can help privacy. And it also means that you're less impacted by things like data breaches, which are constantly happening. And if you use unique passwords and maybe even an email alias with each site that you use, you're much less affected by those breaches, and it's easier to clean up afterwards. It's less impactful to your other accounts. So that's definitely a big one. Bitwarden specifically is the one that I recommend. It's absolutely fantastic. Mobile app, desktop app, browser extensions. It's really like if you do nothing else, you should just go start using Bitwarden today. Like it is an immensely powerful tool, and it's a really nice quality of life improvement. And there are, I mean, to be quite honest, there are not many tools within the privacy and security space that make your life easier, but it is one of those, and it has a real tangible impact there. Another one I think that is something that I hadn't even heard of the concept, much less specific tools, before I started my podcast. And in that first episode, Henry from TechLore mentioned this tool. It's something called Simple Login,
Yeah.
and it's an email aliasing tool. So you can essentially create unique aliases per account or website, and those will all get routed back to your main email address, whatever you want to send them to, whether that's a Gmail, hopefully something like a Proton Mail or Tutanota or something. But your emails will all get routed through to your end email, so you still get all of those emails. But not only do you prevent those websites or companies from tracking you across them by email address, because if you use the same email address on all your accounts, it's very easy for them to corroborate who you are across those things. So using unique email alias helps that, but the thing that is, I think, most impactful is that it helps you prevent spam. It helps you to be able to easily disable email aliases that get hacked or sold to some kind of data broker or something like that. Or even things like Trezor had a phishing attack happen recently where their email list got sold or got stolen from MailChimp. And so everyone who had a Trezor got an extremely targeted, very well crafted phishing email. And so the moment I knew, there's a whole story around that phishing thing, but the moment I knew that it was phishing and that email list had been stolen, I was just able to go into Simple Login, disable that email alias, and no one could use it anymore to send me spam, to try to phish me, anything like that. And
So
I
it
didn't have
keeps
to
track of
change my email.
so let's say I open a Twitter account and I use this tool, it's gonna produce a random email
Mm-hmm.
that they all funnel back to my main inbox.
Yeah. So
And,
just like
somewhere it's identified as, hey, this was your Twitter email. So I can go in and go, oh, disable that one.
yeah, so they have
Oh.
a browser extension where just kind of like with a password manager, when you go to log in, it'll give you a little button within the email field, and you just hit that, and it generates a unique email for that service, and it also marks what website it was on, and saves all that info so that the next time you go there, it'll know which email address you used. And I like to it, or one of the options you can set. I can't remember if it's the default now because I think it's changed, but one of the options is that you can have the prefix for each random email address be like the name of the website. So like your Twitter email address will be like twitter.randomcharacters@simplelogin.co. So that makes it also really easy to figure out which one's the right one too. So it's not totally random, but it gives you a prefix that's easy to recognize for your own use. And that's been one of my absolute favorite tools. I'm kind of curious how many aliases I have now because they've
well, yeah, I think you guys had mentioned something about with phones and phones. I mean, like I have a work phone, so like I have to obviously keep my number there, but everybody gets these spam calls all the time, and that may just be unavoidable. I don't know. They're just calling every number in the book, but that'd be another one to be able to just kind of have a particular number. I mean, well, I don't know. Maybe that's a whole different topic, but can you get into where, you have a particular number that's used for people personally, and then you have kind of a public number, and they're all accessible through the same device? Like I really feel stupid. You're probably like, this guy doesn't understand what he's talking about.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, that's an area most people don't even think about, much less have dug into. It's not something I've dug into too much beyond looking into some kind of anonymous SIM providers. One of the ones that I did an interview with on my podcast is called Silent Link, and you can buy a SIM card an eSIM card from them using Bitcoin. And you get it anonymously, and then you can load that onto whatever device. Normally, like I use Pixel phones because I can put something like Calyx OS or Graphene OS, which is a privacy-preserving version of Android on there. And Pixel phones have the physical SIM card slot, and they have at least one eSIM slot as well. So I can have the physical SIM card, which is my like normal public. My ID is tied to it, unfortunately. The number that I use for friends and family, all that kind of thing. And then I can have this other separate SIM card that is in no way linked to my ID, no way linked to me, but I could use that for public things. So like right now, I have a public Signal account that I use to let people chat with me who want to, and I don't want to share my private phone number, and that uses the silent link phone number that I have.
Okay.
There are some other services like that. I know there's another one, an exciting one coming soon that I won't mention who's bringing it forward, but there's some good services coming there as well. But there's definitely advantages to that, and I think most people don't need a long lasting SIM card, but what they really need is just an easy to use text verification service, because most of the things you want to use a phone number for are not phone calls. It's normally I want to verify this account using a phone number, but I don't want it to be my private phone number.
Hmm.
Signal is a good example of that. Could be Twitter, it could be whatever. So
Yeah.
services like that are really useful, and there's some simple ones like textverified.com is a well-known one that works well, and I think they accept Bitcoin if I remember correctly as well. I don't know any that accept Litecoin off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's some out there. You could always swap to Bitcoin if necessary.
No, not happening. Not anymore. I mean, what do you need to? What do you need? Give me the reason for it. All right, I actually had a few things written down because I thought this might be kind of interesting just to um, maybe get an understanding where are you leaking this information? Like where is most of your information being gathered for your average home? Like in particular, people always talk about Alexa, right? What is Alexa hearing? She's upstairs probably listening to me right now. But
Now she
um,
knows you're talking bad about her.
yeah, she's sending out the drones. So like what do they get? What do they first of all, what are they allowed legally to do with it? What do they do with the information and the what you're saying? Do they keyword? Do they record? Do they what? Profile you, or do we not really know?
Um, so with that kind of thing, with like Google Now, Alexa, Google Homes, all those kind of like smart devices that are always on and always listening, a lot of it just comes down to trusting what they're telling you. So like Google and Alexa or Google and Amazon, who's behind Alexa, obviously, are if they were doing something where they're recording all the time and collecting that data and using it to profile you, they're not going to tell you that because they don't want you to know that. They want you to think that they care about your privacy. But there have been many examples of Apple, Amazon, and Google all having issues where their devices are not just recording after a keyword is triggered, but they're recording all the time, and the information is getting uploaded, and people are listening to that those recordings. I mean, there's also a lot of people think it's kind of conspiracy theorist, but I know many people have had this happen to them, and I've had it happen to me where you're talking with friends about something. No, there's no digital record of it. You're not typing it, nothing like that.
Yeah.
And then the next day you get ads for that specific thing that you were talking about. And the only way that that happens is that the always on listening on your phones is listening and using that information to build ad models
I
for you.
don't. That one I've heard too. It's like I was just talking, and I used to like joke around with my wife. I'd be in the kitchen. I'd be like, "Hey, let's take a trip to Barbados or something, and just see if anything would happen, right?" And I I tend to think like if I were gonna debunk that, it would be, "Hey, I'm talking to this group of friends, and maybe one of them searched for it. Maybe I didn't, or maybe my wife searched for it, or um, yeah, maybe somewhere around me in some proximity." But who knows? I mean, yeah, there's enough AI to just gather keyword information.
And
Uh,
that's not one that I know of that's been like proven. Like no one's like specifically
yeah.
seen that Google is recording it and then using it to build ad models. But that's one that I've heard probably 100 different examples of people having
Well,
done
can
that.
I be honest with you? For the most
Mm-hmm.
part, like obviously, if it's something where the government's able to get that information, or they're using these private conversations for, I don't know, some kind of leverage on you, or what they're going to do with it. But if it's purely for, I want to procure the right products for this person, I understand what they like, and I'm trying to sell them something. I tend to not really care about that much. I kind of say, okay, it does make my life a little easier if I need a, like right now I've been looking for dishwashers on Facebook, and if you tell me Home Depot's got a sale on dishwashers this weekend because I typed that in, that's kind of convenient for me. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, but that's the balance of like, what am I really concerned about, and is that convenience worth the trade off of the unknown that we have?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to kind of unpack there. Because I agree that when it works and is convenient, it's very nice. I mean, I something a lot of people don't know is I was a huge Google fanboy before I started becoming more serious about privacy. I was testing products before they were launched. I was testing every version of Android long before it was released. There was a lot of stuff that I was doing because I valued the convenience that their products brought, and
Mm-hmm.
they also had a very good track record of security around that data. Obviously, they don't have a good track record around the ways that they collect data, but they're very good at security. So at least you generally know if something is being given to Google, they're not going to get hacked. They're not going to lose it.
Right.
So I was a big fan because of the things that they provided and the
They're
convenience
not
they
going to let
provided
it.
were
You know
great.
why? You know why they're good at protecting it? Because it's a commodity. It's property.
Yeah, yeah, for
It's
sure.
worth something.
It both benefits their reputation and benefits them if they have exclusive control over data about who people are and what they do. But I think on the flip side of that, you also have to consider more of the long term pieces that go into this. So if companies that have large access to parts of our life are able to build these models around who we are and what we like and what we don't like, they're also able to slowly shift who we are and what we like and what we don't like towards the things that benefit them over time.
Right.
They're able to leverage this data to try and craft us into better consumers that fit the things that they want. And that is very much a thing that we have seen time and time again. I mean, we've seen that less with the not less, but we have seen it more clearly with things like Facebook, where they have a long track record of essentially leveraging the tools that they have on how they control how content is displayed to users to get the things that they want out of users, to get better engagement time, to get psychological responses and emotional responses, to get these things that benefit them because they know so much about you. They're able to custom craft their approach and how they bring things to you so that you end up giving more money, you end up giving more data, you end up giving more time. And it becomes this
Mm-hmm.
destructive feedback loop where the more you're fitting into the things that they want, the more they're able to control and craft you. And really, I mean, a lot of what privacy boils down to is not, like I said, it's not this I want to go be anonymous and live in a shack in the woods. It's I want to have control over my data, but ultimately that's because I want to have freedom. I want to have the ability to be autonomous, to be my own person, to be self-deterministic and deciding who I am, what I like, what I don't like, who I talk to, what I buy, what I don't buy, etc. And when we give up that privacy and we have all of these corporations and governments um, with such a clear picture of who we are and clear ways to put their own feedback into that loop, we are constantly giving up more and more of our autonomy and giving up more and more of what makes us human. So a lot of it comes down to far past this technological or convenience idea, and a lot of it comes into who are you as a human, and do you lose that if you start to give up control over all of your private information, data, thoughts, speech, etc., to these corporations who then can use it to manipulate you or just use it to sell to the highest bidder? That's kind of a best case scenario. Is they're just selling the data to
Yeah.
the highest bidder, but
Seth,
there are a lot of
I just
worst
want a
case
discount on my
scenarios.
dishwasher. I don't care if I'm you're talking about being humanity. I just want a
See, but that's when
dishwasher.
you just search dishwashers on sale and you don't rely on Alexa.
Well, you know, the first thing like I think about, like I got an iPhone 13 or whatever. The Face
Mhm.
ID. I've hated the Face ID since I got it. I mean, so is a simple thing like get a case that covers optionally allows you to use the front facing camera and just do away with the Face ID. Is that a smart thing to do? Is
I
that
mean, for something
worthwhile?
like that, there are some things that people need to understand that there are provable technological tools that are used to do those things locally on device. So like Apple does Face ID purely locally on device. So like personally, unless your threat model is very advanced, I'm not worried about that per se,
Okay.
because that is computed entirely on device. The models of your face are stored entirely on device in secure chips. So there's like that kind of
Interesting. I didn't
stuff.
know that. Okay.
Fingerprint readers on Android is a common one that people don't understand. Is something that is purely done on device. It's never uploaded. That the information about your fingerprint itself never leaves the device, etc. So there's a lot of that like unless your threat model is very advanced and you're worried about like Google sending you a phone that is backdoored, those things are generally fine. But obviously, if you are worried about something like that, it's something you can easily disable and just use a PIN. And there are key security reasons to not use something like a biometric unlock, especially if you're worried about like if you were drunk or you were knocked out or something like that, with Face ID or with your fingerprint, there are ways that they could get your phone unlocked without your consent. Whereas with a PIN code or something like that, you're going to have to be coerced or do it willingly. So there are definitely a lot of things that go into that, but the worry is about it, like sending that data to Apple and that kind of thing, are
Oh,
normally
interesting. Okay.
unproven and normally not really something that's too much of a concern for me.
So where do you think people leak the most data? Like, where's is it your browser? Is it your phone? Is it your
Both.
what? Both, everything.
It's so I think the two main areas are really on desktop. It's your browser, because the majority of what you're doing on desktop is through a browser. I mean, a lot of people do use apps as well, but many things today are just web apps anyways. So improving the privacy of your browser by using something like Brave browser or Firefox with some additional hardening goes a long way, because another one of the big tools that corporations like Facebook use, or Meta, I guess, use through Facebook, is cross-site tracking, where they're essentially partnering with websites all across the internet, massive percentages of the internet, to include trackers, so that even if you don't have a Facebook account, and especially if you do, they're able to track you and build a profile across the websites you visit, even though you aren't consenting to anything with Facebook. And it's a very common thing, and it's not just Facebook. Google is a big part of that. There are many others that do massive amounts of tracking you and building profiles on you without your consent, without an account, etc., across the web. So improving your browser privacy is a big part of that. And those same browser kind of privacy things apply on mobile as well.
Do a lot of these tools like interact well together? Because, like you said, the thing with Google is it's a good browser in the sense that everything is compatible with it. You never have issues. I'm running this StreamYard right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not using Google, or usually, what else? What else is a big one? Maybe Safari, or
Safari.
yeah, they'll say, yeah, it may not work, right? And so
So the nice thing with like specifically Brave browser is it actually uses the same engine, same web engine as Chrome does. So
okay.
anything that's compatible with Chrome is generally going to work perfectly fine with Brave. I've also noticed that in the last 5 or 6 years, the state of websites being broken through like ad blockers or tracker blockers like uBlock Origin has gotten really good. I very rarely have any kind of website or service that's broken because of the privacy tools that I'm using within Brave browser or something like that. Firefox also generally works really well, but it is a different web engine. It's their own. And so there are
Mm-hmm.
some things, just due to Chrome having such a monopoly on the browser market, there are some tools, especially like audio video tools, that work better in Chrome or Brave browser than Firefox. But like Brave specifically, the compatibility is excellent. I have no problems. I use it for work and personal, and I can't really think of any compatibility issues that are
Yeah.
annoying.
So essentially, like let's equate this to Litecoin here, right? So you want to have kind of your privacy area of your life. You say my personal information, things I do with my family, my pictures, my contacts, and my communication on that end. I want to kind of compartmentalize that into and build a wall around it in a way. And then when I need to go out and act, and I need to go do a video, or I need to access some of these websites, I'm gonna step out into the real world, and then I'm kind of in this semi-shielded area, so it doesn't. It's almost like an airlock. I'm going in from the spaceship into the airlock, so nothing leaks back into my, nothing crosses streams, nothing goes out, nothing comes in. Is that a really crummy way to describe it, or does that make any sense at all?
No, it definitely makes sense. I think that's a lot of the way people approach it, and I think I would urge that you push more for defaulting to privacy. So, like when we're talking about browsers, not using something like Chrome for the stuff you don't care about, and then Brave browser for the stuff you care about, but rather trying to shift so that the majority of what you do, or all of what you do, is doing it using these privacy preserving tools or services. And like thankfully there are ones that you can do everything in, like Brave browser I think is a great example. Firefox can work as well. Like messaging, Signal is an excellent messaging app. I've been able to get all my friends and family on there. I use it for private and public stuff, and just having that default privacy not only protects me, but also gives me peace of mind that I'm not worrying about what is Apple doing with this data, what is Google doing with this data, what is my ISP doing with this data, since they're storing all of these text messages and phone calls for 7 years or more. There's a lot of peace of mind that comes from that. I think the main place where I would kind of consider that compartmentalization of like, this is my private life, this is my public life, is more like work life from personal life. Like when
Okay.
you have to have a work device or have to have specific work services that you don't have control over how they're collecting data or handling it. That's generally when I think like compartmentalization is the best approach. And
Okay.
like that's how I approach work: is work devices are work devices, personal devices are personal. So work devices I don't trust with my personal data. Even though I love where I work, I still just don't trust them because they are collecting all that data for good reason. I've worked in cybersecurity, I understand why they do that. But they're collecting that data and they're required to. They also have control over that data and a lot of other things. And I do the same with phones. So I have a personal phone and I have a work phone, and those do not mix. Personal services don't go on my work phone, vice versa. So I think that's the main place I see compartmentalization. But when it's your personal life, I would definitely urge just trying to use, especially those simple tools that don't really introduce headaches. They don't really introduce pain points into your life, and there's not really much of a convenience trade-off to use them. Things like Brave browser, like Signal, things like switching to Proton Mail over Gmail, things like using Simple Login and Bitwarden that both actually improve your life. They don't make it more difficult, they make it easier. Once you get used to using them, they make it much, much easier. And you gain these other benefits. So I think there's a lot of areas where you can just start to use something for everything and get those privacy benefits. Whether you're doing something that you want to keep private or not, ultimately it gives you control over that data again, and it gives you a say in that again. And that's really the key part of privacy for most people, is just taking back control so that you get to say who this stuff gets shared with, rather than it being out of your hands and something that you no longer have control over.
Okay. Yeah, man. It's not an uplifting topic to talk about.
It definitely can. It can be daunting, but I will say, like the big change, it sounds scary and daunting at first. And a lot of times when we talk about privacy, it kind of sounds like this conspiracy theorist, like everyone's out to get you
Oh,
idea.
I like conspiracies, and I think that and I don't even think they're conspiracies. I think a lot of times we cloak them in the word conspiracy because we're like, all right, I don't know who I'm talking to, right? But if you just go with the assumption, well, okay, the government's collecting all the information they can possibly collect on you. That's their job. Like that should be the default understanding, is they're not attempting to tell you the truth. they're not, you know,
Yeah.
they're not necessarily looking out for your best interests. They're protecting their state, the state that they're in, right? Job number one is perpetuate the state. So if you're somebody who's going to challenge that, then be prepared. Be prepared for something. So um, I don't think that's a conspiracy, and I think it's funny that that word sometimes gets used, and you're like, why would I assume that's a conspiracy if it gets proven over and over and over again?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Sorry, I
No.
think I cut you off there.
No, no. I mean, I
uh,
definitely I agree. I'm more using the term to make people not get scared, rather than to say things are not conspiracies.
well,
Or
okay, we need to coin a new phrase instead of conspiracy theory, because what that says is like I'm I assume there's, a theory means it's unproven.
Mhm.
So what would be the opposite of conspiracy and theory? Something fact. A truthful fact. This may be a
Yeah.
truthful fact that the government's tracking everything you're doing. Well, I do think the scary part of the data stuff is the alignment, the clear alignment between the big tech companies and the governments. And there's kind of a precursor to that. It feels like Europe is like way ahead of the curve in that regard, in
Yeah.
Australia, and obviously like China, where China doesn't. I don't even. China's like a whole nother level probably.
They
They
they're
won't they
they're
don't even
well
let
into the
you.
future that we are pushing towards.
What
But yeah.
they don't understand the idea of selling the data. They're like, we just don't want you to use these tools. Where Europe's like, go ahead and use them, but we're just going to track everything you're doing. You know what I mean?
I
So
think the difference is that countries in Europe and the U.S. have to pretend that there's this veneer of democracy and veneer of freedom over things, when generally that the truth is far removed from that. But countries like that like to pretend that they're a democratic and free country, even when they're not. Whereas China and other countries like Russia, North Korea, they know we don't really care what our citizens think because we control what they think.
Well,
So
but but they may believe it. You don't know. Like they may be under the same illusions we are, but we're told that they don't. See, you were
yeah.
procured that information on your Facebook feed. No, I did. I watched the. I think it was called. Oh man, the Social Dilemma. I think it was on
Mm-hmm.
Netflix. I'm sure you watched it. It's probably
I
again.
still need to actually. I haven't watched it
Well,
yet, but I've heard good
it was
things.
very much. It wasn't about like here's what they're doing with your data and they're
Mm-hmm.
selling it and here's how they're monetizing it. It was much more about the getting you to uh, be on be on their apps as much as possible. And how do I keep them scrolling and how do I keep them engaged?
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality is what they're selling is they're selling advertising, and so
Yeah.
they want to be able to prove, hey, I've got the most effective uh, attention consumption machine. I've built this
Mm-hmm.
amazing thing. And what they on the thing they said, the notification thing is big, right? Bell dings, ding. Oh, I got to go take a look at it. Everybody does that, right? And I after that I turned it off for Facebook. Now I haven't turned it
Yeah.
off for Twitter yet. I probably should,
I
but
have. It's great. Just do
yeah,
it.
and I don't ever go to Facebook anymore. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. I would at least once a day check it because there's always some reason for them to give you a notification. And I'll go like weeks and I don't even look at it. And I'm like, I should probably check if anything,
Just
a
delete
friend
it.
or something,
It's
huh?
time. You should delete it. It's
Delete it.
time. Mm-hmm.
Here's the only benefit I like out of Facebook, um, is being parts of groups that can communicate together. Like, hey, an event's going on, that they don't use email anymore for that stuff. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing I like about it. I'm wondering if I could. I mean, I could probably. So let's say I create a Facebook profile with one of these new anonymous emails,
Mm-hmm.
and I join the groups. I still put my name on there so that they know when I join a group who I am. Um, is that you know good enough?
I mean, it all comes back to the threat model. I mean, for many people, using Facebook is not the end of the world. Just like if you're going to use Facebook and you need it for some specific reason, like you have these groups that you can't get somewhere else and you can't get them to migrate onto something like Signal or some other kind of, I mean,
You
even
want me to delete? You
Telegram.
want me to
But
delete it for my mental health,
well,
not for the privacy issue.
ultimately both. But yes, mental health with social media, mental health is a huge part of it. I mean, I think we're going to look back in 10, 20 years and look at how the course of society has been completely altered by the experiments that we've done through social media. I think it's having extremely detrimental effects, and I think we're going to really we are being hurt as a society through it, and we're really going to kind of see that and look back on that and really shame on what we did and on what Silicon Valley and governments and what many of us were complicit in. But I think the bigger thing is like if you need to use the tool, like use the tool. You can control how you use it. I mean, like you said, disabling notifications is a huge step forward in that starts to give you back some more control about the time that you sink into it. But I would also say like if you need to use it, don't install the apps or the mobile apps are the main way that they're able to collect data outside of the things you want to give them. So like if you need to use Facebook but you're using it sparingly, just use the web app. Log into Facebook on your browser. Log into Facebook on your browser on your phone when you need to use it, rather than installing the app that you're not going to use most of the time, but it's going to be collecting data all the time. So that's I think a big step forward you can take. And like you said, using an email alias, you can just disable it so they have no way to pull you back in. You can use, like you said, a password manager or use multi-factor auth so that it's harder for your account to get hacked, that kind of thing. There are good steps you can take when you need to have it, but I think for most people, there's not really a reason to have something like a Facebook account. Twitter is still kind of the holdout for me that I think it has enough value
I
as a
see you on
platform
there.
that
I see you on there.
it's hard. It's a hard one to quit. If there's a good alternative in the future, I will gladly migrate. But I think Twitter is one of the few that's as long as you can control your usage, because they want to pull you in, they want to keep you there. But as long as you can control your usage, I think Twitter. Same thing for me. I generally don't use the app. I use a simple alias login. I don't give them my phone number. I use two factor. I use a password manager. All these.
So your
things.
name's not even really Seth, is it?
No one will know. It's private.
I'm looking at the comments. Somebody says instead of conspiracy theorist, I use conspiracy analyst. I like that. That's good. I'm a
That is pretty
I analyze conspiracy. Yeah, because the conspiracies are true. People do
good.
conspire, right?
There are the ridiculous ones that are like a little bit too far out there,
That's
but
what you think now. And then
yeah,
you're
I
gonna be in
mean,
a 10 by 10 shack in the desert like Ted Kaczynski with your Chronicles bombing places. You already got the
as
beard.
as someone who's very much not a conspiracy theorist, the last 2 years have made me rethink a lot of how I viewed people who say things like that. Because so many of the things that people were initially saying and getting labeled as conspiracy theorists all came true. So I don't know anymore.
Yeah,
But
this guy John says lizard people. Yeah, that's they're look. There's a natural path you can take to almost everything if you really want to logic yourself into it. But going back to the social media stuff, yeah, Twitter's one. I probably should turn off the notifications because it does pull you in unnecessarily. A lot, one or two, the one or two red number, and I'm like, oh, I've got to see what's happening.
and you
When
can
in
do things
reality, it
like
just
you
yeah.
can
Go ahead.
disable like notifications and the ones that aren't something where you even want to respond to them. Like just doing simple things like that is helpful. Where like
Yeah,
you only get notified on mentions and messages.
DMs or something. Yeah,
Yeah, obviously depending on how big your account is, even that might be too much. It depends, but um, there are definitely ways to tune it. But I just disable it. I get no Twitter notifications, and I just cycle through when I want to cycle through, and I don't when I don't. And no one
yeah.
dies because I don't respond 3 seconds later. Like,
I know that might be the next step for me because I'm definitely on there too much, but I enjoy it. Like that's the thing; it is
oh,
fun.
I do too, and it's immensely valuable. But I also see that when I have notifications on, I end up putting a lot of time into it where I don't actually get much value out of it,
Yeah,
and I end up scrolling and really not gaining much signal out of it, even though I have a very carefully crafted list of people that I follow.
do you do a lot of muting?
Um, Not generally. I try to avoid muting and blocking generally, but if there are accounts that are like obviously disingenuous, obviously trolling stuff like that, then
Like
yeah,
I
I do.
muted recently, Bitcoin Magazine. Nothing against Bitcoin. Well, no,
Really.
something against Bitcoin Magazine. It was like rage every time I'd read a headline. I get so frustrated with it. I don't know why that particular account. I would just find myself like, oh, you're just the way they worded things, whatever, for whatever reason, because it's Bitcoin only, so they would always. Uh, a country would do something with all cryptocurrencies and they would say Bitcoin. And it's like, just be honest, just tell us. But I do find that maybe muting people just for my own, my own happiness when I'm using the app or blocking. Yeah. I don't know that if I've blocked anybody, it might've been just an obvious bot or something, but
Yeah, that's like only people who are actively malicious. But I think the hard thing with tools like that is it's really easy to build yourself an echo chamber. And it's really hard to break out of an echo chamber once you have one. And our
yeah.
natural inclination is always to build echo chambers. That is very much built into us. So that's definitely something that I try to keep breaking out of, and I try to keep following accounts that are outside of the things that I would normally follow, so that I can kind of at least keep the door cracked out of the echo
Well, yeah,
chamber
it
as
would
much
be
as
nice.
possible.
Here's what I'd like the algorithm to do. I'd like the algorithm to go, okay, you're interested in cryptocurrency, so you might be interested in economics. And so here's some just broad economic discussions, not specifically crypto. Like sometimes it feels like it's crypto only.
Yeah,
They don't give me. See, they gotta work on that.
I've seen some of that. Like they recently started recommending me open source as a topic,
Or like throw
which
out
is
some
really
random stuff.
helpful.
Throw out like I don't know astronomy or something. Like oh maybe I'd like that. Just 1 out of 50 posts. Put something random in there and see if it sticks. Cooking.
Spin the wheel. The I'm
Yeah.
feeling lucky of Twitter.
I do. I'd be interested when if and when Elon takes over. It does, although it doesn't seem to be very clear what's happening right now. But
Yeah, I don't.
uh, he is such a mystery to me. Like if you're a conspiracy theorist, you could think a whole lot of different things about, or a conspiracy analyst about Elon Musk. Um, I for a long time was frustrated with him because he was this. I was, if you're coming to crypto from the privacy standpoint, obviously, if you got here also from the, state money and stopping them printing dollars, right? He's been like the biggest recipient of government money of maybe anybody in the history of the world, right? And so for him to be, kind of anti-government, or it's like, dude, you pretty much are the government, right? Like, how many dollars did $12,500 for every electric car he sold came from the government?
It's been
I
quite the
mean,
subsidies there.
yeah, for the that was for like the first 200,000 of every automaker or something like that. Because I even got that. I bought a Chevy Volt back in 2016 or something, and yeah, I think at the time it was maybe $9,500 off the price of the car. So that doesn't go. I mean, does it go to me? Not really. I mean, yes and no, right? I guess I benefit, but also Tesla's the one that gets the check, so they get to sell the car. So, all right, enough about Elon Musk. But is there anything else you want to talk about? I mean, is anything like that you feel like is important to hit on for some security basics or privacy basics, that, or some impassioned speech you want to leave the world?
Um, I don't know if there's anything crazy. I mean, I think that the blog post that I linked you to goes through kind of how I would approach it from the new to privacy perspective. I think that probably says it in a way that's better than my tired brain right now would. But just generally encouraging people to not get scared by the dauntingness of thinking about personal privacy. I think, like you mentioned earlier, it can be very kind of like dark and daunting to think about this stuff, but there's also a lot of positives that come along with improving your personal privacy. And those have been some of the most interesting discussions that I've had with people, are the non-technical parts of privacy, and talking more about the philosophy and the ideals, the societal impacts, those kinds of things that come with people taking their privacy more seriously. And just some of those things being like a peace of mind that comes with knowing that you are in control of that data, that you are getting to share what you want and not share what you want. And it's not that you want to remain anonymous necessarily, or that you are doing these things that you want to hide, but it's an autonomy and a control that you wouldn't have otherwise.
But I
And then
think
also,
the threat
yeah.
modeling, it's interesting. The threat modeling, you mentioning, well, hey, maybe just delete this app, and in that, again, that tech
Mm-hmm.
lore one you did, where he talked about being a digital minimalist.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I
I'm
love that.
not making this up. Like 2 days before that, I was thinking to myself, why don't I just have a phone that's, what if I just deleted everything else except for the phone? And it was just a phone. And I started thinking, would that be really freeing? It probably would. I mean, there would be certain things you would miss. And I think he even mentioned that, like, delete it all. And if you miss it, okay, reinstall it. But you're
Mm-hmm.
probably going to leave 90% of them gone.
Yeah.
And, but I wonder, in the kind of threat model slash, or whatever you want to call it, you probably do a little bit of reflection on yourself. And in that process, by cleaning some of the stuff up, you probably do clear your mind a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
take your eyes off the screen and go, oh, what am I doing here? Like, yesterday you were saying family time, go hang out with your kids. Don't stare at your phone. But, all
Yeah.
right. I don't know. That's
Yeah, no,
interesting.
it has. I mean, and even like you mentioned with the social dilemma and the look that they took at how social media affects you, and there are much broader um, impacts on you than you realize when these tools that are being built to either surveil or to manipulate or to pull you in, when you're a part of that and you just feed into what is the default. I mean, most of us are not choosing these things. Most of this is just what you're expected to do in society. You're expected to have a Facebook account. You're expected to have a Twitter account and Instagram and all of these things. And when you choose not to do that, you look like the weird person. But you ultimately, I think, gain a lot more control over who you are, and you gain a lot of just emotional and mental freedom from that people just don't realize they're missing.
Well, the
And
time. I imagine
yeah,
you so much
yeah,
more time, and you save money, right? You probably
mm-hmm.
buy less
You would.
because you're just not, you're tantalized with bullshit 24 hours a day.
Yeah, yeah. You're
Well,
not getting
anyway.
the kind of the view of everyone else's life where they're only sharing the things that are perfect and smooth. And yeah, there's so many impacts that I think people don't understand the benefit that they'd get from even not even caring about the privacy angle, but just looking at it from that digital minimalist angle and saying, like, what can I step away from and see if I miss it? Like you mentioned, when you disabled Facebook notifications, you just stopped going on Facebook and you got all that time back and you didn't lose anything. You thought you
Yeah.
would maybe, but you didn't lose anything,
Well,
and you
and then you go
realize that's
back and
not
you're
something
like,
you
why
use.
did I care? This is so stupid.
Yeah.
It actually pushed me off Facebook. really the last nail in the coffin is all these local groups. Like if you have a city, it's my little suburb has a group that people go on there and they just complain. And so during COVID, all people were complaining about their FedEx packages not showing up on time. They were like every day, FedEx, where the heck? Well, man, it says it's at the local station. Why can't they just deliver it? And I'm thinking, you are so spoiled. It's just that stuff is what makes me crazy. So if I could mute
Who
people,
knew
like
they were helping you opt out?
I know, right? They helped me opt out. So yeah, okay. So your podcast is called Opt Out, right? The
That was
opt.
not an intentional shill of the
No,
podcast,
it's all
just to
right.
make that
Well, I mean,
clear.
I
But
do. I want to make sure people go check you out because there's so many topics. I just started listening, and you probably feel like, well, how far can this thing go? But I mean, you've got like 30, 40 episodes and a wide variety of topics, and yeah, I like you get a good broad range of people on there, and so yeah, definitely check that out. And apparently, you do have a YouTube channel, but you told me you don't really put videos, but you might start doing some. So
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
The
Go
plan
check
is
out
long
his
term to
YouTube.
start doing some, but right now it's mostly for like people who need automatic translation or closed captioning or something like that. Is the main reason for it, but mostly an audio only podcast at this point.
All right. Well, if you do a video, or if you want to have, I mean, I'm not going to give you any. If I come on your podcast, I'm not going to educate your audience at all on privacy. I might educate them on cryptocurrencies, which would be kind of cool. But yeah, maybe like in a couple months, if you do videos, maybe
Yeah.
you can do a check in with me and see how much have I deleted. So here's where I'm at right now.
So that app number
Here's
count.
you ready? You ready?
I'm
Wait,
scared.
let's see. So here we go. I got lots of apps,
Oh my
lots
god.
of garbage, and a lot of them are just dumb ones I don't even use. But
Not a digital minimalist, I see.
yeah, and I'm not a maximalist in the. I don't like go crazy with technology.
it
Um,
it just
but yeah,
grows
it's the
quickly.
convenience thing, huh?
It just grows quickly. It gets out of hand quickly. It's just
Yeah,
kind of
I don't know enough
the state
about
of
it. Like,
things.
there's the people that have the lights programmed and the speakers in every room and their thermostats hooked up, and you're like, I just feel like that would take so much work. I'm too lazy. I'm too lazy to be that good. But maybe I'll start deleting. So I'll start doing that. But oh, do you want to try and answer some? These might be more complicated questions. Do you want some challenges?
I'm game. I like challenges.
All right. Oh my gosh, here we go. First one. I'll start at the bottom. These are from. He's in the audience, I think. Yeah, Latin Slovak. So we were in the audience the other day. They were talking about facial recognition resistant glasses. Is this the last mile? Is this the end? Is this
So this is definitely not an area of expertise. I will tell you that.
okay?
It's not something I've dug into too much. And thankfully, in most of like the U.S., it's not really too much of a concern yet. But I mean, we've seen things like I don't know if you know the name Clearview AI. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
But they're kind of famous for building software that essentially harvests images from social media, from Google, from basically anywhere they can get it online, and then they use that data. They use those images to build up facial recognition software that they then sell to law enforcement, to governments, sometimes to private corporations. And so there is definitely this kind of coming wave of facial recognition being a tool that's used at best to just be a tool to give us convenience, but I think is quickly going to shift into the ways that like China wants to use it, Australia wants to use it, more authoritarian countries are using this to be able to more easily surveil and control citizens, and especially to kind of police their movements. And we saw a lot of this in South Korea and China during COVID, where they would use facial recognition software to detect people who are breaking the quarantines that they set, track where they went, and then be able to use that to contact trace, but ultimately to kick them back into their homes and kick them back into quarantine. No matter what you think about COVID or quarantine or whatever, the facial recognition piece still stands as a scary kind of future piece of dystopia that could be coming. But as for how effective like the facial recognition proof glasses and that kind of thing are, I'm not really sure. I mean, one of the nice things that came out of COVID is you can wear a mask now as much as you want. And you can usually get away with wearing a hoodie, glasses, and a mask, and no one's going to really bat an eye because of how that kind of became normalized. So those kinds of things are effective against preventing facial recognition, but I don't really have any specific tips for how the glasses work or how those tools work at this point. But
So
it's definitely something I need to look
sunglasses
into.
don't work.
I mean, they could help in combination with other things, but they're normally not going to work. I mean, like you have an iPhone, Face ID works through sunglasses.
I know.
And it's scanning your eyes, which should tell you how it's not super effective, but that's also very close distance, and that's using infrared. So that's different than like camera-based facial recognition, where if the majority of your face is hidden behind a mask and glasses, it's going to be very hard to detect you.
Interesting. All right. Let me see what I want. Keyboard privacy. Do you think there's any like? Are they tracking keystrokes?
I mean, generally, no. Most of the stuff is really coming down to you would need to have a very sophisticated threat model where you have very targeted attacks against you specifically to be worrying about stuff like this. I mean, there's been a lot of research around ways to detect what's being typed just from listening to a keyboard. It's definitely something that can be done. So even if you can't get a keylogger like on the device you're typing on, or a keylogger into your keyboard, if they are able to get some kind of recording close by, whether that's through your computer or whatever, they can detect and guess pretty accurately what you're typing just by the sound of your keystrokes and the pattern and that kind of thing. So again, it's something that can be done, but that's not done at scale. It's not being done by like Apple or Google right now.
It's like
or Microsoft or
targeted
like
individuals,
yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah. So if you're a political dissident in an authoritarian country, yeah, you should probably be worried about that.
Okay. Let me ask you this. This is just me, right?
Mm-hmm.
This thing, right? I can put this little shield over my camera. Do you,
Mm-hmm.
should I do that all the time? Like, does it really? So it's if
Yeah.
somebody hacks into my computer, right? Then they can access the camera
Mm-hmm.
and take a picture of me, I guess.
I mean, it can just be a better default. Normally, yeah, that's still going to be you're worried about targeted surveillance. Where I mean, it could be not a nation state. It could be someone who wants to extort you because they know that you have it. I'm not saying you have a bunch of
Sweet
Litecoin.
lava
They could
lamp.
say you like Litecoin and you have a nice lava lamp. So they want to target you and record you to try to extort you or record you to try to get information about your private life or something like that. Like
Right,
that
gotcha.
could be an angle. So doing something like if it's an external webcam, just unplugging it when you're not using it, or if it's like in your laptop, just using one of the little sliding covers. It just gives you that again. It's more peace of mind. It's more a better default state rather than leaving it wide open and potentially risking something. But again, most people you're not going to need to worry about that, but that's not to say you shouldn't just take that step. Like if you never use your webcam, just tape over it. Like there's no harm there. And if you do use your webcam, you can get one of those sliding covers, or if it's an external, like I said, just plug it back in when you need to use it, that kind of thing. So there are definitely options, but also not something like you shouldn't be running around paranoid that everyone's trying to hack your webcam necessarily.
Yeah. Do you hear that thundering? Does it sound like thunder in my house? That's my 8-year-old. She's nuts. She runs like an elephant. Anyway, all right. Oh no, they're almost done with school. They're pretty excited. So, all right. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I got other ones. I don't want to take too much time. I think these are probably smart to keep them at about an hour because they get too long. People start to zone out. So, no, I would definitely like to do something on the show, or if you can make it to a Twitter Spaces, that'd be fun. I think that would be interesting. You'd probably get a lot of interesting conversation going.
Yeah,
It's
I'll definitely have to
something.
do that in the future. I think it's a really great medium to be able to have audio chats with people who aren't like the person in the podcast or something like that. There's a lot of interesting.
Yeah, well,
opinions,
because
so.
it's hard. Sometimes it's difficult. You're doing podcasts. I don't know. I don't know if you edit a lot, but sometimes you feel like I don't really know because I don't know you really well. So sometimes you don't know if the personalities are always going to meld together, and
Yeah.
so having kind of a broad group, it usually helps. If it keeps the conversation flowing, it's a lot more fun. And if it doesn't work out, if it's quiet, you just put some music on and just kind of hang out.
Yeah.
I was up late last night doing these things. So, all right. Well, thanks for coming. Like I said, go check out Opt Out. Is it the Opt Out podcast or Opt Out podcast?
Just Opt Out or Opt Out podcast. Yeah.
Opt Out. And follow Seth on Twitter and look forward to his videos and Twitter Spaces. Apparently, he's now committed to doing.
Wow.
And turn off your notifications. You'll be healthier and happier for it. So,
You
All
will.
right. Well, hey, thanks. And if tomorrow, hopefully you'll get to see us. We'll have the video tonight. We're gonna do it at midnight. It's looking like it's gonna be at like 1:15, 1:30 in the morning. The MWeb transactions will be going through. I'm sure Charlie will be sending them to David and all that. And so I'd like to see your critique of it,
Yeah,
or
it's
just
exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how that takes off and what kind of support it gets, and especially just interested to track what percentage of people use it, because optional privacy is always an interesting
well, right,
thing
yeah,
to me. So I'm curious to see what kind of uptake you'll see.
yeah. Cake Wallet is committing to do it on the mobile. So right now it's just on the
Nice.
desktop Litecoin Core wallet. So I
Yeah.
think adoption early on will probably be you know slow because not everybody runs a Core wallet.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, I'll send you create a wallet. Give me an MWeb address. I'll send you some contraband Litecoin. All right.
I'll have to give it a try. Thanks,
All
man.
right.
Looking
All right,
forward to seeing
everybody.
how the upgrade goes.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you at midnight, a couple hours. All right. Bye, Seth.